Well, Dustin, what would you say in your experience with CICOA and with Dementia Friends in identifying some of those challenges, hard realities when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's? So just share some stories, some things that you've learned as far as just this very difficult disease.
I think the biggest barrier by far is the lack of understanding about the condition.
Because people think memory loss, right? Oh, if someone has dementia, it's memory loss. Is that what you're...
It's memory loss. You say the word dementia and your initial thought is that it's an older adult in the corner of a nursing home in their wheelchair, humped over, and that's what their life is.
Yeah.
In reality, 70% of people with dementia are here. They're in our communities. There are churchgoers, there are customers, there are friends, there are neighbors. They're not in a nursing home. They're out and about in their community. So I think that's the biggest challenge with this condition. If you remove the obvious, where we're trying to find a cure and a treatment, take that out of the equation, all the science behind it. If we take the reality of living with this condition, which we know we're going to have to for quite some time, the biggest challenge is just a lack of understanding. The beauty of that challenge is that it's treatable, if you will, quote unquote. We can treat that lack of understanding, and that's the most effective approach that we can have with this condition. In fact, I used to work for the Alzheimer's Association. I used to work with the medical community, reaching out to them to let them know of resources. And one of the things that I kind of geared in on is that the most effective treatment for this condition is education and support. That is better than any pill or anything else that one can subscribe to somebody. And the beauty of that, there's no side effects. There's no contraindications of that medication, and it provides as good or if not better outcomes by just having the education and understanding of the condition. So knowing how to approach somebody who has the condition, knowing what they're going through, knowing what their caregiver is going through, that's what's going to lead us into a world with this condition that already is an epidemic, but is going to become much more prevalent, but yet lead us into a world where we can manage it. It's like anything I've ever really seen before, and so when we talk about some of the barriers, that lack of understanding, if we can just get people talking about it, understand the basics, we're going to revolutionize how this condition is looked at across the entire country. I won't go into specifics, but I mean, we hear horror stories from emergency departments, from environments and locations and places that you would think that these people should know how to interact and engage with this, and people just they don't, and that's okay to an extent. I mean, it's not that people are bad people.
Sure.
They just need to understand that this is a condition of the brain, that the individual is still the same person that they were, just kind of in a new suit, if you will, and just know those basics of how to approach, interact, and engage with that person, and that by and of itself will make all the difference in the world. One of the biggest consequences of dementia is isolation and withdrawal for both the person with the pathology of the disease as well as their caregiver. And so as the disease advances, the person with the condition and their caregiver, they stay inside more and more and more. They don't go to their favorite restaurant anymore. They don't engage with their friends and family anymore. That in and of itself has empirical evidence to show that it exacerbates the disease process for the person with the condition and has its own detrimental physiological effects on the caregiver for the person. So if we can create these more conducive environments and get people better educated to where these folks feel like they can continue to go out to their church and to their grocery store and to their favorite restaurants, because we're breaking down that education barrier and that awareness barrier, that is going to create an environment where people thrive and are able to remain in their home, independent, and in their community for as long as possible. And it's going to be kind of the new norm. This disease isn't going anywhere. It's only going to increase and increase and increase. So to kind of backtrack to your original thought, the biggest barrier is education and awareness. That's what this movement, Dementia Friends Indiana, seeks to do, is create that education and that awareness. It's simple, but very, very effective, and the results of it, I think, will be life-changing. I compare it the same way when you look at HIV 30 years ago.
Sure.
You look at HIV, people didn't understand it, they feared it. People who had it were embarrassed to have it, they didn't talk about it. You fast forward to today, and it's just common nature daily life for people because it's better understood. Even I remember being in elementary school learning about HIV, and that's where it starts. So now that I'm an adult, that stigma was never there to begin with because I understood the condition. That's where I think dementia is, where there's a big misunderstanding, but just like HIV, there needs to be a movement that breaks down that understanding so that the average person knows what's going on, is aware of the public health component of the condition in a large scale arena, but also can sit down and articulate and have a dialogue with somebody with the condition because they understand the disease now, just like HIV, because they're not afraid to approach somebody anymore. And in doing so, just like with HIV, that's what's going to be the game changer, and that's what this movement at the end of the day is all about. And it's not an understatement to say that a movement like Dementia Friends Indiana, what we're trying to do here is the best cure, if you will, for this condition, for that very reason. You break down the stigma, you better educate. This condition becomes just like I'm the dental patient. Do you look at me and say, Dustin, you're a dental patient? Probably not. So let's get to a point where you look at me and say, Dustin, you have dementia. Who cares? And that's where we hope that this movement takes us.
Something that's so interesting, Dustin, as I hear you share, it's such a paradigm shift, because when we think about aging and the associated challenges, we immediately maybe default to, okay, what's the medical solution, medical strategy? And not saying that that's not important, but what I'm hearing from you is that there are other resources that are available to us that doesn't necessarily have to be our default, right?
Medicine is crucial.
Sure.
And research is crucial, and we obviously want to get to a stage where this disease doesn't occur anymore. But that's not the reality today. And so today, yes, you're exactly right. The best treatment today, and proven by empirical research, is that while there is no cure for dementia, we can do things today that have nothing to do with pharmacy or medicine or physicians or science or anything to make life better and health outcomes better for those who are living with the condition by just simple everyday tasks of being more welcoming, more understanding, and more conducive for those living with the condition. And right now, that's the best approach that we have. And that's okay, because we've seen that approach can really be positive.
Absolutely.
And so that's the real bright light in all this, I think, is that I'm actually happy to see how much Alzheimer's and other types of dementia are in the news these days, because it didn't used to be that way, but it is now. But the stories are always about failures of drug trials and all these different things. But what's really encouraging is we can wait for that. We can wait for those drugs to come down the line one day, because we do have a solution right now. and that solution can make not only the lives of those who are living with the pathology of the disease better, but those who are caring for those with the pathology better too. Right. And it's a really unique position to be in, and through this movement, Dementia Friends Indiana, that's what we're looking to achieve, and we're really proud that to advance that understanding and education, and that's what it's all about. Advancing the education and understanding.
Yeah, and bringing hope. You mentioned the family caregiver, and who just give unrelenting care day after day. How do you guys come alongside them to be a resource, to provide hope and just dealing with a loved one who has this disease?
And that's exactly it too. The support, education, intervention, letting them know that there are solutions to some of their challenges. It doesn't mean that the disease is going to go away, but we can put plans in place to minimize the challenges and optimize the quality of life for your loved one that you're caring for, as well as yourself, and to empower the caregiver to remain a powerful caregiver. I have always equated dementia to being a two-person disease. You have the person who has the pathology, and then you have at least one caregiver. And why it's a two-person disease is even physiologically, the person who's caring for their loved one with dementia comes down with physiological illnesses at a rate that is actually outpacing those of the ones that they're caring for with dementia. So the mortality rates of people with a family caregiver, so if I'm a spouse caring for my loved one, there's a higher chance that through my caregiving responsibilities, due to the stress of caring for my loved one with dementia, I'm going to pass away before my loved one with dementia passes away. And there's science behind that with increased cancer rates, lower immune system responses, all kinds of things. So with the caregiver, it doesn't have to be that way. And it goes along the lines of the entire theme of this whole movement, and this is why, because we can create communities, we can create environments that are welcoming, conducive, to where instead of the caregiver being trapped in this kind of cage of caregiving role, they are released to continue to live the life that they need to live with their loved one, because Rick, because Dustin, because anybody here doesn't care that somebody with dementia is in the room. And we also appreciate what the caregiver of that person is going through, and we accommodate them, and we make it more conducive and welcoming. So,
Any personal stories you think of, and what you're providing that come to mind? Not to put you on the spot, but just to kind of think about, it's those personal stories that help us really get attached to what's going on. And so anything that comes to your mind?
So I guess very personal and kind of a unique angle to it. But my grandmother, and you'll understand when it ties in, my grandmother we didn't know it at the time, we could see signs of it. And I was in college, so I was like, I'm that college student who thinks he knows everything.
Yeah,
I was like,
of course.
My grandma has Alzheimer's at 21 years old. But she did. And after my grandfather passed away, we put my grandmother in a apartment. And right after that, she began to decline rapidly. And it was a result of the Alzheimer's. And long story short, the point of it is, we actually, when we put her into an extended care facility, she began to thrive. And it actually, I would say, probably added years to her life. The reason for that is because when she had what was then, we now know, Alzheimer's, and was isolated and withdrawn, that was adding to the exacerbation of her disease process. When we got her into an environment that was functional and very social and engaging, she thrived. And so from my standpoint, I think that kind of fits the profile of what we're trying to do here at Dementia Friends, is that, you know, engaging, socialization, remaining active, independent in your communities, whether you have dementia or not, is the key to a lot of stuff. And so if my grandmother can actually, you know, on a scale, she's declining, and then because of the lack of socialization and everything else, and then gets put into an environment where she has that with this condition, and then scales up and remains there for a long period of time. I think that goes to show just how imperative it is that we don't need to rely on a nursing home to provide that. What if my grandmother had the resources and the accessibility to remain independent and in her community with her friends and everything else, because our society had adapted to being more welcoming and conducive for that? Would that delayed her nursing home admission longer? Probably. So that's just one of a billion examples of just what the impact of just a more welcoming, understanding, and conducive environment can do for those living with this condition. And if you multiply that by everybody who has this condition, we can really make a big positive dent in our society.
Right. Because currently, how many people are diagnosed with either Alzheimer's or dementia? What's the...
This is only diagnosed about 5.4, 5.5 million on paper.
Yeah.
If you want to dive into the details and peel back the layers, it could be double that, because there's an estimated just a amount of many people who are undiagnosed
flying under
with
the
the
radar
condition in our society too. That's only those with the disease pathology. We're not talking about the caregiver too, which, as we talked about, has its own health consequences because of this condition.